Now, are you willing to travel to Japan to make that fight happen? Yeah, all action, all the smoke.
Yeah, I don't care.
I like it.
Yo, what's good, everyone? This is Ayo Box from Adiba, and we're here to talk about Naoya Inoue officially moving up to 122 after vacating his 118 belts. This news just broke this past Friday. So, what does this mean for the 122 division, and who will Inoue fight next? Before we get into that, we have to discuss the elephant in the room, which is my favorite fighter at the lower weight classes, Stephen Coolboy Fulton, the unified WBC and WBO champion at 122. For the past 2 years, Fulton has brought up Inoue's name several times, saying that he would beat Inoue. And in this past year, Inoue has become undisputed at 118 and then petitioned the WBO to be a super champion, which gives him the ability to be Fulton's mandatory. However, we now know that Fulton's next fight is against Brandon Figueroa at featherweight for the interim WBC belt. And to be honest, it looks like Fulton's ducking Inoue now because he's been calling out Inoue's name and he's not going to fight him next. It doesn't look good from a fan perspective, from a lot of perspectives. And this gives ammunition to Inoue fans and Fulton haters to talk trash. But I can't blame them though. But this begs the question, why did Fulton make the jump to featherweight? Well, Fulton said himself on an IG Live that he made a fight with Figueroa because his undisputed fight against MJ at 122 fell apart because MJ was injured and has to satisfy his IBF mandatory. This caused Fulton to only fight once last year, and he didn't want to wait around for a fight that may not happen with Inoue. Which kind of makes sense because these fighters want to stay active and they want to get paid as well, so they want to fight. And fights are not 100% guaranteed. This is a common theme in boxing where people talk about fights and they don't get made, so I can understand from Fulton's point of view. But then this leads to another question. Why rematch Figueroa at featherweight when he could have just fought a mandatory at 122? Well, maybe the first fight was somewhat controversial between Fulton and Figueroa, so it's understandable why Fulton may want to run it back to put an end to things. Also, Figueroa is a big name in the lower weight classes, so we'll have to assume that it's going to be a payday for Fulton as well. But this leads to another question. Will Fulton come back down to 122 after dealing with Figueroa? There's reasons to question that because Ray Vargas, who's the current featherweight WBC champion, is moving up to 130 to fight O'Shaquie Foster for the vacant WBC belt at that division. So assuming that Fulton wins against Figueroa, the WBC interim belt will give Fulton a straight path to the featherweight WBC belt. And you also have to remember that Fulton's a PBC fighter. And there's a lot of PBC guys at featherweight right now that he could fight. And there's several good fights that he can make as well. So it's not a far-fetched idea for Fulton to vacate his belts at 122 and stay at featherweight. But you also remember that Fulton has fought at featherweight before and came back down to 122. He fought Adam Lopez at featherweight and then became a champion at 122. So it's not a far-fetched idea for him to fight at featherweight and come back down. But we'll have to see. So a potential fight between Inoue and Fulton is not likely next. But you also have to consider the promotional aspect between Fulton and Inoue. Inoue is top rank while Fulton is PBC, and we know that those two promotional companies don't like to do cross-promotional fights with each other. So I'm not sure if Al Heyman and Bob Arum would even get that fight to even happen if these guys were available. Maybe the fight can go to a purse bid, but once again, we'll have to see. So let's look at other opponents that Inoue could face in the meantime. If he's going the WBO route, he can face Rais Aleem, who is the #1 WBO contender. And Aleem has expressed that he would like to fight Inoue, so I feel like that would be a good fight for Inoue to be tested at in this new division. Then there's Luis Nery, who's #2 in the WBO rankings. He's a former champion, and I feel like he would give Inoue a different look and a good test. But I don't know if Neri's ever expressed that he would fight Inoue. But yeah, I feel like that would be a good fight in general. But you also have to consider that those two guys are PBC associated as well. So once again, will those fights get made over promotional issues? We'll have to see. Then we have a sleeper guy I feel like will be a good fight for Inoue is Tomokio Kameda. He's the youngest brother out the Kameda trio. And if you know anything about Japanese boxing, the Kamedas are a big name. So I feel like that could be a big fight in Japan and a good debut for Inoue to fight at 122. But there's other possible opponents that Inoue could face. MJ, who was the unified WBA and IBF champion, but he's fighting a mandatory next. And it's more likely that Inoue will have to fight a top 15 guy in the WBA or IBF before he gets a fight with MJ. So I don't think that's going to be next. And then there's Casemiro, who is now fighting at 122, but that's for another video. But who knows, this is boxing, anything can happen. But thank you for tuning in with Ayo Box from Adiba. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and more content is coming your way.